How smart would a character be if they had 20 intelligence? Today we're going to take a look at various characters from different forms of media to find out who is the smartest hero or villain of them all. Before we can start looking at feats and determining who has the most intelligence, we have to start with the first, most basic question. What is intelligence? This question might seem ridiculous at first glance. Intelligence is obviously how smart a character is, right? Well, it's a bit more complicated than that. At least it is for me, because I'm a smooth-brained, low-end dummy. In the 5th edition D&D Player's Handbook, intelligence is defined as follows. Intelligence measures mental acuity, accuracy of recall, and the ability to reason. The skills that fall under intelligence are Arcana, the ability to recall lore about spells, magic items, eldritch symbols, magical traditions, the planes of existence, and the inhabitants of those planes. This is basically your knowledge and recall of all things mystical and magical. History, ability to recall lore about historical events, legendary people, ancient kingdoms, past disputes, recent wars, and lost civilizations. This is basically the same thing as Arcana, except instead of recalling facts and information about magical items and spells, you're recalling when certain battles occurred in a war, which generals were commanding each side, and other information like that. You remember which famous quote was said by that one guy and where he was when he said it. Investigation. When you look around for clues and make deductions based on those clues. Some of the examples given are that you might deduce the location of a hidden object or be able to identify what kind of weapon was used to inflict a wound just by looking at the wound itself. You might also be able to quickly identify which part of a tunnel is the weakest and therefore most likely to collapse. Nature. Your ability to recall lore about terrain, plants and animals, the weather, and natural cycles. This is basically all your Boy Scout badges wrapped into one. Do you know which bugs and mushrooms you're allowed to eat and which ones have historically caused the highest number of stomach issues on a Wednesday during the winter months? If you know all that, odds are you've got a pretty good bonus to nature rolls. Religion. Your ability to recall lore about deities, rites and prayers, religious hierarchies, holy symbols, and the practices of secret cults. This is basically the same thing as Arcana and history, but you're recalling specific details about religions, sacred locations, and holy texts. Do you know what year it was when Mistra first farted? Religion expert. So just by simply stepping back and taking a look at these categories as a whole, we can see a pretty clear picture of what intelligence is. It is your overall ability to recall information that you've learned. You pull this information from books, conversations, monuments that you've seen, patterns you've noticed, and you're able to retain all of it for when you might need it. Memory is a big part of intelligence because learning things is only one half of knowledge. You have to retain the information to have access to it. You can learn everything, and if you forget everything, you don't know anything. So you have to do both. A tiny bit of seemingly worthless information may end up solving a murder years down the road. And you, as this high intelligence character, you are the person who's going to remember that tiny fact when it matters. So now that we know what intelligence is, let's talk about what each end of the intelligence scale would look like and take a look at some extreme intelligence feats and the characters who perform them. When you're running a character with an extremely high or extremely low value in any of their stats, it can often be challenging to imagine what that would actually look like in real life. A character with 20 intelligence would be smarter than I personally can actually comprehend, because they would have a very strong grasp on concepts that make literally no sense to me at all. I'm too dumb to know how much smarter than me they are. The writers of these characters often run into the same roadblock, which is why quote-unquote super genius characters often end up having ridiculous and convoluted plans that end up making no sense, because the person writing the 20 intelligence character may only have 12 intelligence themselves, which is nothing to be ashamed of at all. It's just not possible to understand the vast chasm of knowledge that exists between 12 and 20 unless you're on the 20 end. So, as I'm drawing examples of characters to use for the faces of intelligence, there will most likely be examples that are in the 22 to 24 range, as well as some in the 18 to 20 range. It's hard to say for sure that one character is 2 points smarter than another one, unless you have hundreds of interactions between those two characters specifically. So in short, some of the examples I give for 20 intelligence might be a bit higher or a bit lower, but they will all be great representations of the stat itself. With that being said, let's talk scale. In the player's handbook, if we take a look at the ability scores and modifiers section, we can see that a score of 10 or 11 is the normal human average for any of these stats. But adventurers and monsters are stated to be a cut above average in most abilities. A score of 18 is the highest that a normal person will ever achieve in any stat, with adventurers being capable of reaching scores as high as 20 in these stats without magical assistance or very high level capstone abilities. Monsters and divine beings can reach stat levels as high as 30. In a few of my past videos, I've received a few comments saying that I'm scaling these stats improperly. Some of the criticism is valid, and I've tried to make improvements in those areas, but there have been a few people who have specifically called me out for saying that 10 is the normal human average. These commenters usually say something to the effect of, 10 is supposed to be the average for an adventurer, and adventurers are considered to be superhuman in this universe. Now, while I don't disagree at all that an adventurer would be super dangerous to run into in real life, even at first level, the book literally says in clear-cut black and white here, 10 or 11 is the normal human average for each stat, and adventurers are mentioned by name in the same paragraph as a totally separate group of individuals. A score of 1 would grant your character -5 to all of their intelligence rolls. This would essentially mean that they have a hard time completing normal tasks, and that they face a bit of difficulty with even easy tasks. This person can't remember faces, names, dates, where they left their keys, anything. They have basically no information recall whatsoever, and you would never go to this person with a question about anything. They are likely brain damaged or have some kind of degenerative disease affecting their memory. They will also probably be almost feral and just acting on pure instinct. They're not going to be a good traveling companion. In media, you're not often going to run into a character with an actual score of 1 intelligence. It would be nearly impossible for a person to survive if they were that stupid. They would forget to breathe. What you normally see instead is a character who has severe memory loss or brain damage for narrative reasons. We all know Wolverine can't remember his past, but he's not exactly a super low intelligence character either. He is a smart guy, he just has penalties when it comes to recalling specific information. Sometimes he gets bits and pieces, sometimes there's nothing. I want to take a look now at some examples of monsters from the monster manual, and we will compare their intelligence levels. I think this is actually a pretty good way to scale, maybe not to scale characters, but to at least get your mindset in the right place. The Carrion Crawler has 1 intelligence. This is a large creature whose entire existence can basically be defined as looking for dead stuff to eat. It doesn't make plans. It doesn't communicate with other nearby creatures or understand language. It moves, it uses its little sensory tentacles to smell around for food, and it eats. It is basically a walking example of living by instinct alone. A cockatrice has 2 intelligence. This creature is essentially a super pissed off chicken. It responds to any threat with immediate violence without regard for its own well-being. They also have the ability to inflict wounds that will turn their victim to stone over time, so that's pretty sweet for a hyper-aggressive bird brain like this. Here we have an entire page dedicated to various kinds of dinosaurs, and every single one of them has 2 intelligence. So, as you may have probably already gathered, it is difficult to even find an instance of 1 intelligence amongst the animal kingdom. Most things you encounter will have at least 2 intelligence, and it will usually be much higher than that. One last example from the manual to really drive this home. Cyclopses are known for being notoriously stupid. They're often portrayed as giant lumbering idiots. Their super low intelligence is often pointed out as a tool for comedic relief, as they pick their noses and eat their own boogers and other such super stupid activities. That Cyclops has 8 intelligence, just barely below the normal person. I saw you eating your boogers earlier, by the way. You can lie to us, but you can't lie to yourself. The low end of intelligence is filled with animals and brutes, acting on their own baser instincts and without planning or forethought. Now, let's talk a bit about the upper end. I mentioned earlier about how most people will only ever reach 18 in any given stat, with adventurers being capable of 20s. Every character I'll be mentioning here will definitely fall into the adventurer category, so we're looking for a few of the smartest people from their respective comics. I had multiple commenters guessing on who would be the face of this video, and a lot of very intelligent characters were included in the guesses, for sure. We had Iron Man, Spider-Man, Batman, Doctor Strange, Professor Xavier, and a few others. These are all excellent examples, with a few of them actually being members of Marvel's Illuminati, which is supposed to be made up of the smartest people in the world. Iron Man and Spider-Man are both very accomplished scientists and engineers. They have both invented and built multiple different suits and gadgets over the years, and could easily teach their subjects of study at a very advanced level. These guys are geniuses, and given the proper motivation, they would both be extremely dangerous threats to the entire planet. Batman gets placed at the same level as Sherlock Holmes for me. They're both incredibly intelligent, and they're both world-renowned detectives in their respective universes. These guys are so good at finding and understanding clues. They can walk into a room and tell you what's missing just by what's there and where everything is and all that stuff. The clues of the room will paint them a picture that it wouldn't paint for me and you. They notice context clues that are so minute that a normal person wouldn't even dream of picking up on it. And to them, it's like a neon sign pointing it out. They use logic and reason to eliminate scenarios that couldn't possibly be true until you're left with only the one scenario that is, and that's the one that happened. These are the guys you call when you need a murder solved, but the murder was committed by a superhuman whose powers are specifically tailored to avoid being caught. Batman and Sherlock Holmes would catch that guy. Doctor Strange and Professor X are both very intelligent characters as well. Strange having some very high bonuses to arcane and religion for sure. Xavier is also kind of cheating though, because he can literally make someone else remember things for him if he needs them to. So while Xavier definitely has at least 20 intelligence, he would definitely need a few buffs to some of his roles because of his Omega level telepathy powers. I saw a few people mention Reed Richards or Mr. Fantastic from the Fantastic Four. Reed is canonically known as the smartest man in the world in Marvel Comics. This is the dude that will just casually invent a time machine in one story so that his team can go on some crazy time travel adventures. His actual powers lead people to think he's a joke character because he looks very goofy when he's stretching and contorting into crazy shapes. But I want you to stop and think about this a little bit differently for a second. Have you ever seen how insanely good an octopus is at escaping captivity? Their bodies are essentially a liquid, and they can squeeze through tiny cracks and holes that you would never imagine them getting through. The scary part about them is their problem-solving ability and their ability to use tools. So even if you lock the door, they will figure out a way to unlock it. And if you set obstacles in their way, they will move them or move between them. Now imagine yourself being hunted by this same creature, except it has the highest intelligence of any living human on the planet. He is smarter than you, he's likely faster and stronger than you, and there is almost nowhere on Earth where you could go to get away from him. Reed basically also can't be hurt by anything that a normal person would do to him in an unplanned fight. What are you going to do? punch him, kick him, he's going to absorb that and laugh in your face. And he can just wrap his body around yours, either imprisoning you or outright suffocating you with ease. You wouldn't stand a chance in a fight against this dude. It's terrifying to think about. There are stories where Reed becomes a villain, and he is almost immediately a multiversal threat, which means he is capable of damaging or destroying the entire multiverse through his insane levels of intelligence. The characters that I've mentioned earlier are all likely 20s in intelligence or close to it, like I said before. Plus or minus 2, something like that. I do think Reed Richards would have to have at least 24 intelligence though, and I think he needs expertise on pretty much all intelligence related roles and maybe even some others. With the use of his invented gadgets and devices, his potential for investigation roles and other such mundane tasks become basically limitless. He may not be the best detective in the world, but he can build a machine that is. Reed's arch rival and nemesis, Doom, is also a very intelligent character, and I very seriously considered using Doom as the face of this video, but I decided against it. What I'm going to do instead is make another video where I'm going to be covering Doom and likely a couple of other people who I think are cool that are not getting fully dived into in this video. We'll have something separate, something special for them. And to absolutely no one's surprise, the main character that I've chosen to be the face of intelligence is Brainiac from DC Comics. Brainiac is said to have a 12th level intellect by DC Comics standards. On that same scale, the entire collective intelligence of humanity only reaches an average of 6th level. Bruce Wayne and Lex Luthor, who are considered to be the two smartest people in the world, are both rated between 7th and 9th level on this scale. Lex is another person who I'm probably going to cover in that video I was mentioning with Doom earlier. Brainiac is a member of a race called Coluans, who all possess genius level intelligence by our standards, with the average Coluan falling somewhere in the 8th and 9th level intellect range. This means their average people are as smart or smarter than the very brightest minds on Earth. On his homeworld, on a planet full of 19 to 20 intelligence characters, Brainiac is considered to be a prodigious super genius. He routinely invents devices and drones that perform various functions for him, from acting as vessel bodies to shrinking down and capturing entire cities, which will then be added to Brainiac's collection. He also flies around through space in a ship that looks like a giant Cthulhu head, so that's pretty cool. In order to properly visualize what it would be like to fight against this monstrous level of intelligence, I want you to imagine another scenario with me. Imagine that you're sitting in your room, staring down at your phone, watching some idiot talk about comic book characters, and all of a sudden, the entire internet itself turns against you. I don't mean public opinion turns against you. I don't mean you're getting canceled or fired from your job. I mean the internet itself is now a hostile entity. It has access to all of the knowledge and information that has pretty much ever been learned and recorded since the dawn of civilization, and vast amounts of it from even earlier than that. Imagine a being that could control every single piece of technology in the world around you. It knows where you are at all times. It can see you through your phone camera. It knows what you do in your free time and what you're afraid of. It can process thoughts so much faster than you that it has already seen every outcome of this encounter and has simulated your defeat thousands of times before you ever even knew it was coming. Fighting against Brainiac is almost 100% futile for most people. The only reason Earth stands a chance in most of the stories is that we have the Justice League protecting us. And spoiler alert, Superman is a surprisingly good counter to a lot of bad guys, and Brainiac actually does have a weakness that can be exploited. Although he has all the intelligence in the universe and pretty much knows everything, Brainiac falls into the same trap that a lot of highly intelligent characters do. He basically has zero wisdom. He's not good at understanding people and their emotions or motivations, and his robotic arrogance often causes him to underestimate his enemies, which leads to his own defeat. You've seen that story a million times, I'm sure. Super smart bad guy has a foolproof plan, but because they underestimate the enemies, they are completely defeated. Because of Brainiac's ability to formulate and enact various complicated plans at the same time, often ranging from years to decades in scope, his basically unlimited knowledge of every single subject, and his expertise at inventing technology which could easily destroy a planet, I'm gonna put Brainiac at 30 intelligence. We would then have to give him huge bonuses and a bunch of other hacks to replicate his immense power levels. Firstly, a boss fight against Brainiac would probably look something like the Elder Brain fight in Baldur's Gate 3. You would be contending with a ridiculous army of robots and drones, all of whom would have laser weapons and other advanced technology. Brainiac is actually well known for his force field technology, and you can bet that these minions are definitely going to be using that against you. After dealing with this wave of minions, you would have to contend with Brainiac himself. Now, you might be imagining that a fight against a super high intelligence character would be easily solved with brute force, since the super smart characters are usually kind of frail to give them a weakness. Yeah, this is just simply not the case for Brainiac. His body has been technologically enhanced to such a degree that he can go toe-to-toe with Superman in a fist fight for extended periods of time. In order to replicate these enhancements in a boss fight, I would probably do something like the Jars and the Mystic Carrion fight. Maybe the level around the boss fight itself has hidden devices you can destroy as you explore, and each one of the devices will disable a specific buff that Brainiac has access to, or the devices could be part of the fight itself, requiring the players to stop DPS on the boss and switch to an alternative target, destroy that, and then go back on the boss, something like that. Brainiac is pretty much the intelligence equivalent of Superman's strength. He basically has as much intelligence as he needs for whatever story he's currently in. He would automatically pass any intelligence checks or saves that arise, just automatically, because he knows basically everything, and his incredible mind is not going to be fooled by an illusion or something primitive like that. His drones and scanners make sneaking up on him nearly impossible, and he would be able to identify your weaknesses and exploit them almost immediately. The alert feat fits here for sure. Warcaster also makes sense, since Brainiac can maintain multiple complex thoughts in his mind at once. I think having advantage on his concentration saves makes sense. Plus, he's got zappy robot hands. Choosing which class he would be, I think, is a bit tougher, especially if we're looking at it from a Baldur's Gate 3 perspective. I think Brainiac would realistically be a combination of a sorcerer, wizard, monk, and an artificer, which is a magical technology-based class that isn't officially available in Baldur's Gate 3, but is available through the use of mods. Let me know down in the comments what class breakdown you would go with for Brainiac, and do you think it's possible to even come close in Baldur's Gate 3? I personally have my doubts for this character. He would be kind of tough to replicate. You could do something thematically that would fit, but you're never going to come close to this character. He is a raid boss. Also, let us know what other kind of buffs and effects would you give Brainiac for his boss fight. I think personally that it would be super cool to have a whole level that you had to fight through, like his spaceship, and as you're going through this place, you have all these drones and robots and other machines attacking you, and Brainiac is able to talk through them, kind of like the Myconids in the colony in Baldur's Gate 3. So you hear his voice through everybody there, just telling you how worthless your attempt is and how much time you're wasting and resistance is futile and all that. Ultimately, this would lead to the boss fight and then probably an epic scene of the ship crashing and your group barely survives, crawling out of the wreckage, and then you wake up on the Sword Coast in Baldur's Gate 3. Oh shit, started from scratch. But anyway, that's my super smooth brain, low intelligence idea of a good boss fight. Let us know down in the comments what you would do. how you would make it better than that. I want to give a special shout out to my channel members. You guys are awesome, and I really appreciate you and your support. If you're interested in becoming a channel member or supporting the channel through Patreon or Ko-fi, there are links for all that in the description below. There is also a link to my Discord, where we can be found nerding out about comic books and RPGs most of the time, so definitely feel free to click that link and come join us. Anyway, this is where I'm going to leave this one, travelers. As always, I am glad you got to see me. Do your best to stay alive out there. Until next time, see ya.